Nicholas Conti here, as always, representing KVFX. And in today's video, we're going to try to unpack and we want to take a look at the rhetoric surrounding the Brics nation versus the US dollar. As a caveat, we're also going to include 5 reasons why the US government won't default. So there's been a lot of news surrounding this. Is the dollar going to zero? Should we worry? Should we be in a panic? What's happening with the USD? So we all know the old adage, men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. They can be manipulated, as a caveat. So we're going to take a concise look at the data and see where we stand today. So side note, JP Morgan did actually sell gold amounts heavier than the volume of the central banks. So that in itself was one big highlight that I see a lot of constituents speak about, these central banks buying gold. But neither here nor there, we did catch a nice gold trade. Shout out to our member section, shout out to our alerts group. More information on that and the details, you guys can reach out. But let's get this thing going. Is it the end of the USD? Is it the end of the great American empire? So as of today, let's take a look here and let's see what the numbers say. So we got this nice handy dandy chart, which is going to be the USD versus the G10 nations, as well as the USD versus the emerging markets minus China. Don't worry, we're going to get to the red state, if I'm saying that right, here in a few moments. But the USD is close to record highs against most of the currencies, including the rest of the advanced world that we've seen there in black. And then we have the emerging markets. Now, this last statement I don't necessarily agree with. We do see potential waning in the USD dominance, yet that's not here nor there. And we're going to give you guys a little bit more concise info as we move along through these charts. Now, the dollar is used in 88% of all trade. Shares in turnover remains high. Share in allocated reserve is still high. So, in opinion, or just following, not even, excuse me, that ugly word opinion, but in looking at the data to see in why is no competition. So we can see just the trade in dollars, that most of the globe still is using dollars. I know, there's a lot of noise, a lot of things going on about the dollar dominance, but looking at the charts, this moment in time, we're still fine. So let's shift real quick, and we're gonna look at the actual myths or 5 reasons why the USD won't actually go, or the US government won't actually go bankrupt. So number 1, US government has the authority to tax up to 20% of global output. No other entity has that access to this revenue stream, and this is not something that can be just reversed, with the snap of a finger. So let's take a look at this chart. We see the world economy, everything is traded in dollars. So that's going to take a massive unwinding to change that effect in the tax or the benefit that the USD has with being the global reserve currency. So this next chart is going to be the US government, the issuer of the global reserve currency, and also risk-free bonds. Investors have very few similar options. As long as the productive base remains firm and inflation is tamed, i.e. the hunt to kill inflation by the Federal Reserve. Now, there's always a demand for US dollars in bonds. We can, verify that by looking at the weekly options. We can see a big demand for bonds, especially now that yields are, starting to potentially roll over. Now, the US government has a massive asset base that the media largely ignores. As of 2013, the IER estimates the government fossil fuel resources is worth 155 trillion. Now, this is 5x the current debt level, so we do have reserves. Now, Congress can theoretically authorize the Fed as well to buy all bonds issued by the Treasury. They do have an unlimited checkbook. The government could, in theory, become a self-funding entity, which eliminates the risk of running out of money. So there is debate about hyperinflation with that, but that is something that could happen in theory. Now, the Treasury could also theoretically choose to not issue bonds at all and could instead become the sole issuer of money by circumventing the commercial banks, outsourcing of money creation, and issue notes for use. Now, that's very unlikely, but it's not impossible, and that is an interesting dynamic. Removing the Fed, we also hear the saying "counsel the Fed," in the Fed. So that is something that's on the table. Now, none of this means the government can spend as much. So don't worry. We hear a lot about the hyperinflation and, red versus blue gonna spin us into, hyperinflation. Now, again, the government can spend as much as it desires, or it doesn't mean that they can spend as much as it desires without negative consequences. It means the government constraints are different from, corporations, which cannot print, tax, and borrow like the government can. Government constraints oversupplying liquidity and inflation uncontrollable. So those are some of the constraints, supplying liquidity, keeping market, in balance. Or there's a term the Fed uses that's not coming right to me. So basically efficient markets. Now this is an excerpt from a great book called Pragmatic Capitalism. I just want to put that source out there. And as a side note, I did want to tell my guys that's in our private, mentorship and education platform, shameless plug, that this doesn't mean the U.S. Reserve status isn't waning. It just shows it won't happen overnight. Decades are more probable, and the Chinese. So just a little, add-on. They said we're gonna get back to China. Now the Chinese have a closed capital accounts and fixed currency. Its gold doesn't seem to replace the U.S. dollar. So I just want to throw that out there because I see everyone highlighting the yuan and China as next up to the reserve status. Now that is a big shoe to fill, and I don't even believe that China wants it. So I see a lot of this again rhetoric with the Brics nation, the end of the dollar collapse, and I just want to calm some of that hula or some of that noise I see out there, because a lot of it isn't followed with data. So this is the news you guys could use. If you found any value, what to do, hit that like, share this out. You guys can follow us on all forms of social media. Peace, love, light. We're gonna see you on the next video.